Okay, now we're live and we've got our colleagues from Zoom with us. May I first of all wish you all a happy new year, wherever you are. Welcome to the British Interplanetary Society's first prestige lecture for a long, long time. I think COVID had something to do with it. It's great to see so many of you here at our headquarters in London tonight. I hope you haven't had too much of a battle with the ice and snow to get here. I think, and I hope, that you have got here okay, and I'm pleased to say that as many as 50 people are with us here, and we've got another 50 online from all over the world. And our camera and Zoom are in the capable
recording in progress.
And feast. Looks as if we've got to find a little entry. Oh, we're being recorded, right? We better be careful from now on. Before we start the proceedings, I must remind those of you in the building of the health and safety requirements. If a fire alarm goes off, it is real. We don't have any practices lined up for tonight. Please leave the room by the door at the back of the room. And if the fire is at the back of the building, turn right and go to the front door. If the fire is at the front of the building, turn left and go out the back door into the yard. We'll all meet up at the Vauxhall Park entrance and go off to the pub from there. So that sounds like a good plan. So I think we'll carry on with the proceedings. If you need any facilities, the gents are at the corridor on the left and the ladies up the stairs on the first and second floors. So I hope you can find them okay. I think the next thing really is to thank you all for joining us. And as most of you know, I'm Alistair Scott, President of the Society. I'm also Chair of the Events Committee. So I'm always on the lookout for new ideas and events that we can actually put in our calendar. Am I supposed to be in control of that? Okay. Those of us who are joining us on Zoom tonight, please use the chat box for your networking and for your questions. If you can, to identify your questions, put in the word question or Q in front of your question, and we'll read them out at the end. Tonight, we are extremely fortunate in having as our speakers two very well-known personalities in space and astronomy circles. Dr. Robert Zubrin, founder of the Mars Society, and Lord Martin Rees, Astronomer Royal, who has just rushed over from a debate in the House of Lords. I hope you won. We're so lucky to have both of them here with us tonight, and I must thank one of our newest council members, who happens also to be chair of the UK Mars Society, for telling us that Dr. Zubrin is on a European tour and has already been, I think, to Paris and somewhere else before he came here, so we're lucky to have him. And what we're interested in really is their talk tonight is actually on how to explore Mars. And I'm sure there are plenty of questions to be asked, and they, I hope, will answer them. It will be an exciting evening. Though I'm sure they need no introduction, I thought I should attempt a short introduction of each, but discovered their biographies were both about 4 pages long. Both started out as mathematicians, but Dr. Zubrin went on to the aero and astroengineering route, while Lord Rees followed the astrophysics and astronomy route. So slightly different there. I have to say, though my earliest connection with astronomy was actually back in 1957, when Patrick Moore was going to be my science teacher at prep school, but he left to become the editor of the Spaceflight magazine here and to start Sky at Night. So I didn't have him as my teacher, but he came and lectured us to us several times. I followed the aero engineering route myself and played a small part in the design and wind tunnel testing of the Airbus wings back in the 60s before being sent into space, actually across the road into the space division of British Aerospace. And that was in the 80s. So I won't take up any more time, but Dr. Zubrin went on to join Martin Marietta, a competitor of ours. Actually, I think it was Lockheed Martin, possibly.
Well, it was Martin Marietta, then it became Lockheed Martin.
Yeah. I used to compete with you, and I used to launch with you, actually. So possibly we may have met there. And founded the Mars Society in 1998. Lord Rees looked at quasars, black holes, and, in fact, I discovered the Longitude Prize. So we're looking forward to hearing a little bit about that, maybe. So that's enough from me. Over to you, Dr. Zubrin and Lord Rees. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, if I can start off by asking you, really, what is it you're going to be talking about tonight, and whose side are you on? Because we know that one side is going to be discussing manned activities on Mars, the other side looking at really, I suppose, unmanned. And with the news recently of various problems in unmanned vehicles, we wonder what the subject is. Would Dr. Zubrin like to start the comment?
Well, should I use a microphone? Or
No,
can
that's
people
all
just...
right. I think we're getting you on that one.
All right, I'm loud enough. Okay, while I'm very interested in initiating human exploration on Mars, am certainly no opponent of robotic Mars exploration. But I do think that the current robotic Mars exploration program is not on the right track. And I have some comments to make about that, that while we're in this phase of robotic exploration, how we might change it from the way it's going now to, I think, a more robust, exciting, and creative program. And then I will talk a bit about new kinds of robotic missions that you might view as transitional to human missions that will be enabled. That is, we now have a heavy lift vehicle, SLS, and by the time this year is over, we'll have another heavy lift vehicle, the Starship. And this changes the game. It enables human exploration, but it also enables much more potent robotic types of explorations, what I call robotic expeditions. And then I'll talk about human exploration as such. And then I think I've got some comments to make about human settlement as well, which is the subject of my next book, which is coming out in the US in February. And here, Penguin is publishing it in August.
Well, thank you. That's a good start. Now, Lord Rees will have a slightly different, I hope, view of what's going on.
Well, not that different, really. I think to talk about different timescales. I have a book that came out 8 months ago called The End of Astronauts, co-authored by a friend of mine called Phil Goldsmith. And what we say really is that as robots get better, the practical case for sending people in the short run to assemble structures in space or to explore the surface of Mars gets weaker all the time. And therefore, if I was an American taxpayer, I wouldn't want to spend anything for the NASA manned program. And the reason I wouldn't is not only that robots can do everything better, but that it's unduly expensive because it's so risk averse. I'm an enthusiast for human space flight, just as much as Robert is, but I think it should be regarded as an adventure and high risk. And the program of NASA, Artemis, and going to the moon, to Mars by 2040 or 2045, I think that'll hit the buffers long before, because the Americans are very risk averse, as we see by the fact that the shuttle was launched, I think, 130 times or thereabouts. There were 2 failures, which you both remember, each killed a crew of 7. They were sort of traumatic for the Americans, and they caused delays in the program, etc., extra expenditure to try and bring down that failure rate, which was 2%. Now, you could never bring the risk of a Mars journey and a return as low as 2% plausibly. And so I think what would happen is that the Americans are going to be worried about the risks to which they're exposing the people they're supporting, and they would go on and on trying to make it safer with no success. It'll just edge up towards $1 trillion. That wouldn't surprise me. And why? So my view is that the human space flight, which is a great adventure, and I think all of us who remembered Neil Armstrong's one small step thought at a time that we would live to see one small step on Mars. And I think we might. But if we do, it'll be not because of NASA. It'll be because of the billionaires doing cut-price, high-risk programs, launching the kind of people who are prepared to accept not just a 2% risk, but who are prepared to accept much higher risk than American taxpayers feel it's right to impose on civilians. So my scenario is that there will be people on Mars, I hope, in the second half of the century. They will be sponsored by private enterprise and by Musk and Bezos and that lot. They would be going in a cut price way, much, much cheaper than Artemis and what follows it. And they will perhaps go on one-way trips. And I think Musk has said that he hopes to die on Mars, but not on impact. And in 40 years' time, that's realistic. He's now 52, I think, and so he could do that. But as we know, there would be people prepared to take a 50% risk of not coming back, and we should cheer them on, because they will, by the end of a century, have produced a little sort of colony of people on Mars, under a little dome or in a cave or something like that. And they will be leading pretty uncomfortable lives. It's no more comfortable there than being at the South Pole or the bottom of the ocean. So it's not a place where people would be comfortable. And here I move over to the sort of scenarios that Robert talks about. These people could be the precursors of a post-human species. Because one thing is I emphasize, which seems to be under-emphasized by Robert in his book, is that the technology that may be coming in first will be human modification by genetic redesign. And so I imagine there will be these first people on Mars by the end of the century, and they will be pretty uncomfortable there, but if they stay there, they will use all the knowledge of human enhancement and genetics and cyborg technology, which will exist by then, and which probably is going to be heavily regulated on prudential or ethical grounds on Earth. But these guys are well away from the regulators, and they've got a far greater motive to adjust and redesign themselves and their progeny to cope with this very hostile and unearthly environment. So my scenario is that this century, there will be private enterprise flights taking people to Mars that will lead to a colony of sort of really enthusiastic, very brave people who will cheer on. And these people will be important in the cosmic context, because they will be the pioneers of a post-human community. And this won't be Darwinian evolution. It'll be what I like to call secular intelligent design, which will be much, much quicker. So within a few hundred years, they could be a quite different species. Whether they'll still be flesh and blood or whether they'll be electronic, again, we don't know. If the latter, they'll be near immortal, and then they won't necessarily want to stay on the planet at all. They won't need an atmosphere. And because they're near immortal, they could embark on interstellar voyages. And so that's my scenario. So I think it's people going to Mars as a high-risk enterprise this century, but the long-term goal is not to have a sort of comfortable life on Mars, but to be the pioneers of the generation of new species and much wider space exploration.